Hello, film faithful, and welcome back to the Movie Pope podcast. And today we are going to be taking a look at Gladiator II. And the big question we're asking today is, were we entertained or not? But before we dive in, remember to like, comment, subscribe. I see that we are growing in subs, so thanks to all the people who are taking the time to watch these videos and hitting the like and subscribe button. And if we can try to get more people in on the Movie Pope podcast, it'd be great because we are looking to grow our channel. And we are going to be taking a break after the Christmas holidays, so we won't be back until the middle of January. But we have a lot of great episodes planned for next year. So in the meantime, if you're missing us, just dig deep into the archives, check out all the episodes of seasons 1, 2, and 3, as well as other adventures that we've gone on the channel. But other than that, let's go ahead and dive in. Lee, so we saw this movie back in November, and it took us a little while to formulate a discussion about this because a lot has been thrown at us, and it took us a while for us to process what we just saw. So why don't you go ahead and take us into Gladiator 2, because for the life of me, I tried turning it over in my head. I even watched the first Gladiator movie. I'm really starting to wonder if someone just copy and pasted this the screenplay for the first movie and just swapped up the names with the hope that we wouldn't notice anything.
Yeah, I mean, I guess if you don't know the first one, this might be a surprise. But after watching it, I was like, oh my gosh, like borrow way too much from the first one. And it was distracting, to put it nicely. Because it just rehashed too much of what the first one does, and I don't think it really did anything better. I think they expanded in some areas, but I don't know if that really made it I don't think it made it a better film. So was not, like I said, wasn't overly happy with it, but it also wasn't the worst thing I ever saw, but not much of a ringing endorsement there. But yeah, I mean, even like the start, right? So you kind of get these, like, I guess, like illustrations, right, of the first one, kind of focusing on, kind of the fight between Maximus and Commodus. And I didn't understand why they felt to have the opening like that. What were your thoughts? I just thought it was kind of weird. Like, I didn't get why they felt the need to, like, kind of have these, like, weird visuals of the first one being kind of the start of the film.
Well, it's quite simple, Lee. There are some certain individuals who have spent 20 years in prison and did not have the opportunity to see the first Gladiator movie, so they want to recap that for everybody.
Oh, okay. If I don't know if that recap helped anybody, because I'm not gonna lie, like, unless you saw the first one, I have no idea how that's be helpful to anybody. But hey, props to everybody that liked that, because I mean, visually, it's got kind of this cool style to it. I just don't know what you're gonna get out of it if you didn't see the first one. So, but yeah, I guess you get a little bit of a recap of what happened at the end.
Yeah, previously, well, Lee, it's like those old TV shows you used to watch back in the day. Previously on Gladiator.
Yeah, clearly, except we're not gonna actually have any actual anything being said during that. It's just gonna be all visual media. So.
That would have been a lot. That would have been a lot funnier if they did that.
Well, I mean, they literally have they start off with a text crawl, right? I mean, not literally a text crawl like in Star Wars or something, but I mean, once you get past the illustrations, it's like, hey, this takes place 16 years after the first one, and it really starts off with Lucius from the first one, right? And I guess, spoiler alert, we're within 2 minutes. Because I don't want to go back and forth with the character's name. We meet Lucius from the first one, right? So that was Maximus's son with Lucilla, right? So that is who we follow. They make a big kind of try to hide it through a lot of it. And I didn't really understand why they wanted to do it, but whatever. We follow Lucius and his wife, right? And I remember watching this, and I turned to, I don't know, I know I told Steph, and I don't know if I told you. As soon as I saw her pop up on the screen, I was like, she's going to be dead in 10 minutes.
Yeah, that's what you told me. Yeah.
Yeah, I was like, she's going to be dead in 10 minutes. And I think I think from the time she enters the screen to the time she gets shot with the arrow, I think it's about 11 minutes. So she made it just a little bit longer than I was expecting.
But she wasn't that impactful as a character in that movie anyway,
She was totally unneeded. Like, I guess it kind of helps anchor you with the audience, because people are like, oh, I have a significant other. Like, I would be upset if they died. Even though we barely see like them interacting at all. I'm surprised that she wasn't like super pregnant. And she sacrificed herself for Lucius. So, I mean, I guess they didn't go that far, but she absolutely had that, like, she might as well have been a red shirt. Like, she was doomed. As soon as she was on the screen, she was doomed to die.
Well, I mean, by the end, she technically was a red shirt.
Yeah, yeah. She did not make it very far to this film. So, yeah, we see Lucius kind of living in Numidia, where he is having residence at this stage after fleeing Rome at the end of the first one. And we get to kind of see this this naval fight where we have General Cassius, right? And that is played by Pedro Pascal, who I really liked in this, and I feel like his character was super underutilized. Because I found him to be very like interesting. I liked what he kind of represented, and as we kind of go through, and I'll kind of touch on it again near the end, but I felt like his character was not utilized the right way.
He's kind of got that Marcus Aurelius vibe to him, if you think about it, because both of them,
absolutely,
because both of them are the sort of noble, Roman military figure who believes in the best of Rome and want what's best for Rome. It's just,
exactly.
Whereas within the Cassius's case, he's kind of got at the wrong end, the wrong end of the stick, because he's kind of being used as the tool rather than the guy swinging the tool.
Yeah. That to me is what really bothered me, because it's like he really embodies kind of like what Maximus wanted to do, right? Like, he was all about, setting things up properly, like he, recognized, what Rome was becoming. Like, he embodied what he wanted. So it's so weird that his character plays like second fiddle to Lucius, who I really couldn't care about.
I mean, but he also plays second fiddle to the villains of the movie as well.
Yes, and we'll definitely get to that, because that was also, to me, a bizarre choice where, once again, I feel like you're expanding, but you're also taking away from the film.
Yeah, but that's the irony, is the fact that even though they expand, they really don't add anything to it.
Yes. Yeah, exactly.
It's empty calories, basically.
Yeah, you bring in these characters and they don't actually do anything. I feel like you would have had a much stronger story if you focus on fewer characters, especially as we kind of get into this, because Acacius kind of attacks Numidia, and Lucius is captured and becomes a gladiator, really following in his father's footsteps, I guess.
Well, that's it. Well, don't forget, he was also, both of them were farmers as well. So
yes, like they show like he kind of like plays with the grain and all that stuff, and he kind of like emulates him in certain ways that we kind of remember from Maximus. But yeah, it's just such a kind of like an odd choice to have. I mean, I guess it's called Gladiator II, so it'd be weird if he's not a gladiator. But it feels just so forced, and it feels like a total cut and paste job to put like, hey, cool, we're gonna have kind of him go through the same things that Maximus did, and it just feels so. It's hard not to draw comparisons to the first one, which to me was far superior. So yeah, he's back on the path, or he's on the path to being gladiator, just like Maximus. And we get to kind of meet our villains, right? So kind of the first two obvious villains is we meet our two emperors, right? We have Gita, and then we have Caracalla. Did I say that right? Geta?
Yeah.
Whatever. Okay, cool. Well, like I said, I'm not Roman, so they'll have to help me out here. You're the the intelligent one in the group. So, but we have these two emperors, and it is just they're terrible characters. I'm sorry. Like, I just don't have anything really redeeming to say about them. And it's really weird because when I think of the first one, right, you think of kind of the battle between Maximus and Commodus, right? And Commodus had some like really cartoonish scenes, right? Like he kind of has this like kind of freaky subtlety to everything he does, and then sometimes he's like kind of totally over the top. Like there is kind of this like constant disconnect where you don't know what you're gonna see with him. But in this one, with these two emperors, it's literally just watching two people just act like total nut jobs on the screen, and it's so distracting. Like there's no subtlety behind it.
Yeah, they're very one-dimensional as
yes,
villains.
yeah, absolutely. Like it's just it's just bad. Like I just didn't care about them. So what do you think of the two emperors compared to Commodus, who was the villain in the first one?
Well, I was watching History Buffs, where he was doing a review of Gladiator, and
I also watched it.
and what makes it so interesting is the fact that he points out that what Commodus did in the first movie was he was basically, his motivation was basically out of jealousy and frustration, because he was jealous of Maximus because his father, showered more praise and attention towards him, while basically treating Commodus as if he didn't exist. And it's also just based on the fact that, hey, this is what my dad loved. I'm just going to go ahead and destroy everything that he loved because I never got any of that when he was around. So in a weird way, you could sort of sympathize and understand where Commodus was coming from, is because he was doing it just to get back at his dad for not being very attentive.
Mm-hmm.
And we've all had those moments where, where we feel like we're not getting enough attention from our parents, so we kind of act out, we do things in a way to kind of bring the focus back on them. Whereas with Gita and Caracalla, I mean, there's really no motivation as to why they do these things, other than the fact that they're insane. I mean, we would like to have some backstories to what led to that point. Even if it's something like they were the product of incest, like you could sort of understand why the way they are because of their development. But no, we don't really know anything about them other than the fact that they're like these two really, overly empowered, sadists who just want to turn Rome into their personal playground. Which is which is a bit of a shame, but it's also kind of lazy on Ridley Scott's part, because someone should have pointed out this and said, hey, you've already done the story beat. You don't need to retread those lines again. You do have permission to go somewhere else. I think it's safe to say the real villain of the movie was Denzel Washington as Macrinus.
Yes.
Because he's the one who's sort of pulling the strings. And I was going to say, the way that Macrinus is portrayed as a sort of like kingmaker, the sort of puppeteer who's kind of, turning the emperors against one another, I thought was a brilliant move, really. Because throughout the entire movie, you don't really know what he's up to until like the last 20 minutes of the film, when he reveals, hey, this is what I'm all about. And even that speech he gives to Lucilla about about how he wants to destroy the Rome that Marcus Aurelius loves, that pretty much borrows from Commodus from the first movie, right there. So I think really, the emperors are irrelevant. You could have had a benevolent emperor and someone who's trying to make good on Marcus Aurelius's dream, but Macrinus kind of worms his way to the top and kind of begins to influence him. I thought that would have been a more impactful, more of an impactful relationship, and would have made the story far more compelling than just having two, batshit crazy emperors who kind of get pushed over the edge by, this arms dealer and slave dealer.
Yeah, because honestly, it's like you kind of agree with his path, right? Like, even though he has ulterior motives, I don't think anyone's like, hey, these two emperors, they should be in charge. Like, I was just like, oh my gosh, like, please just kill them off, because every time I have to see them like totally overacting, it's hard to watch.
Well,
So,
it's also blatant in their appearance, like the way they look, being all pale and red-eyed. It's like, I mean, the only thing that's missing are horns and a pitchfork. Like, that's all you're missing, really. Like, how were you getting Joker vibes from those two? Because I kept thinking
a little bit.
I kept thinking like I bet they're gonna drop a line about, hey, we all just live in a world of chaos, Like, I kept thinking that the entire time because of the way that they were behaving, and I get it. Like, they want the audience to know that these aren't really good people, but I feel like it's insulting, really. I mean, I would assume the audience would be intelligent to know and catch on what makes this person a villain, what their motivations are. But apparently Ridley Scott has to spoon feed everything to us, including making us know, hey, these guys are the villain. If you don't know that, they're really pale, they've got puffy eyes, and they cackle a lot. So
yes.
Them's the villains. Go and point at them.
Yeah, and there's just, like, to your point, right? There's just no subtlety to the performance, where I feel like at least Commodus gave some of that, right? And it just, it is just weird that they're so chaotic. And I think it does bring up something very interesting, right? It's the character of Macrinus here, right? Because really for him, he kind of plays this in a very interesting way. And I do kind of like his character, but I feel like in the movie, it was so overstuffed with everything they were trying to cram in, because you got, him kind of vying for the top. Then you have like, you kind of have like Lucilla trying to figure out, like, is, this person she's seeing in the Colosseum, is that my son? Is it not my son? So like you kind of have that going on. You have a Cassius who's kind of dealing with his kind of struggle of like, he's a leader, but like he's doing things he doesn't want to do for Rome. And he kind of has this like very kind of troubled situation. So you have like all these things just kind of vying for screen time. And it just felt so overstuffed. And I think if you kind of dialed it back, right, if you're going to like take some parts of it, I wish they focused more on, like I said, I found a Cassius to be a lot more interesting as kind of a, I don't want to say hero, but like kind of the character we wanted to follow. Whereas on the other side, like Macrinus was such an interesting character, but I felt like you kind of just gave way to too much nonsense with the two emperors that it just didn't really work for me. So, but yeah, so, we have kind of all these like things that are going on. I guess we could kind of fast forward to one of the fights at the Colosseum, and like I said, we're not going to talk about all of them because it's like, fights a monkey one time, fights a rhino, like there's just a whole bunch of random things. But the naval battle in the Colosseum was an odd choice, right? Because and I did find out, and you told me this, right, that they could actually like add water to the Colosseum to create this type of stuff. But one thing I'm sure that the Romans couldn't utilize and wouldn't utilize are sharks. Like, why sharks? Like, I mean, like, it's so weird to me because I think about the first one, and I'm not, like I said, I'm not here to talk about historical accuracy of this stuff. It's a movie. I don't think it's there for that type of stuff.
Yeah, and there are other channels. There are other channels that can handle that. So if you want to check those out, I mean, you could check out History Buffs or History Hits or whatever for that.
Yeah, exactly. So, but even for me, right, it's like the first one feels very grounded. When I start to see sharks swimming in the Colosseum, I'm just like, come on, like this is ridiculous. Like there's just no feasible way that that's ever going to happen. So, and then I think unfortunately too, what happens is you kind of bring in the jump the shark type of idea, right? Like,
I mean, they literally jumped the shark in this one. I mean,
yeah, like it literally, right? Literally, that's happening in this moment, and it was just so comical to me. I just couldn't help but just kind of roll my eyes, and I'm like, I can't believe the guy that gave us the first one, which I thoroughly enjoyed. I'm watching a sequel where we have sharks in the water in the Colosseum. And I don't know. What do you think? Like, am I putting too much into it, or did it bother you as much as it did for me?
For me, I couldn't care less about the shark incident. If that's, because keep in mind, he's not going out to make a historical accurate representation of Roman life. It's sort of like this fantasy, this Roman fantasy of the mind, where emperors are evil and gladiators lead uprisings and all that stuff. So if he wants to put sharks in the water, that's fine. Obviously, I'm assuming he must have found a way to transport them and make them viable in the Colosseum, because if you remember your biology lessons, most sharks are saltwater creatures, and I'm guessing the water they put in there is fresh water.
Yeah, from the aqueduct, right? So
yeah.
Very, very interesting choice. But yeah, so all the fighting aside, like, they're cool moments. Like, I have to admit, like, you have to kind of just enjoy like the costumes, the design. Clearly a lot of work went into it. So I don't want to overshadow that, but ultimately, it's just fights for the sake of fights, kind of like what we saw in the first one. And then we kind of start to move towards, I guess, kind of like more of the second half, which is where I think things kind of pick up with a lot of the story. This is where we kind of see Macrinus starting to kind of make his move in that political atmosphere, right? Because he has been, kind of buddying up with some people within Rome. And then this is where he finally, kind of uncovers this plot where Acacius is going to rescue Lucius, obviously for Lucilla. Unfortunately, Acacius gets caught. Macrinus is like, hey, cool, you know what we should do? We should have him fight in the Colosseum. And this kind of sets up this fight between Acacius and Lucius. Lucius.
Well, to be fair, near the beginning of the movie, Macrinus asks Lucius, what can I do to, compensate you or satisfy you?
Oh, for sure.
And Lucius says he wants Acacius. So
yeah, absolutely. Yeah, there is a very good story reason for it, right? Because we see, obviously Lucius blames Acacius for everything that happened, and killing his wife and attacking where he was living. So there is a very good story beat reason for this. We kind of have this I guess climactic fight between these two characters. And I think it was, for the most part, well done. Like, this to me was one of the highlights in the film for me, because, we've seen Lucius kind of just focus on this, like, aggression, right? Like, he just, wants his vengeance, so to speak. I even think they kind of utilized the line for the first one, I'll get my vengeance in this life for the next type of thing. So, it made sense. And this is where I feel like Acacius really shined as a character, because he's playing such a hard role, right? Like, he has so many things that he's trying to balance out, because, he has this relationship with Lucilla, and obviously, like, he really cares for her, right? And he does not want to see her get upset by him killing Lucius. And I think this is where he also, feels more and more of that conflict, where he's out there, killing all these people for a Rome that he doesn't really believe in at this time. He just kind of does it out of, like, a duty to his country. And I just find that to be so compelling for the character, which is why when he gets killed, right, when he gets shot, it just totally killed the rest of the movie for me, because I was really hoping that he would play a bigger role up until the end. So what do you think about Acacius in this circumstance? Like, did you like the character? Do you think there was more opportunity for him to do more?
Well, let me ask you this. Were you hoping that Acacius would live to the end of the movie and even take part in the creation of a new Rome? Was that what you were going for or hoping for?
No, not necessarily. And that's a very good question, because what I feel like would have made more sense, right? So we kind of have this situation, right, where Lucius is, like, he sends off his ring to these people that are pro Acacius. I forget where they were settled at, right? Do you remember? It begins with an O, I think.
Yeah, Ostia. It's like a port city up
Ostia.
near Rome. Yeah.
Okay, so like this is to me what would have made more sense, right? So Lucius has been pretty much out of this whole sphere this whole time, right? Like people don't know he's actually alive. There's probably only like a handful of people that know who he is, right? So to me, what would have made more sense was I think it would have been an opportunity for like for Lucius to kind of have a bigger role where he's able to work with Acacius, and they would kind of have that other army on the side. Because for me, what I really couldn't get over is the fact that why would this army, right, that's out there, why would they like get a ring and just believe that Lucius is alive and they're going to like pick up arms and actually march on Rome? I could not get over that. To me, that was stupid. What would have been, at least for me, what would have been smarter was for them to make it out of the pit for Macrinus to depose the two other emperors, and then there'd be some type of clash there at the end where you want to have them do a final fight, whatever, that's fine. But to me, that would have been better because I just couldn't get over the fact that anyone's gonna like march to Rome because somebody brought them a ring. That's how I feel. Now, Acacius totally could have died during the battle, and I think that would have been more poignant for him to die during the battle. I just think he got killed off too early.
Right, kind of killed off at the wrong place at the wrong time.
Yeah, because like I said, like you could totally have like him get killed in that like altercation at the end, and I would have been okay with that because he would have done his part. I just feel like he brought too much to the screen, and when they killed him there, it just kind of it made everything else to be kind of unbelievable, right? Because I look at Acacius, he's almost kind of a villain for Maximus, right? Like, he's
surrogate father kind of thing.
Yeah, like he's the general that like everyone worships, that people have like confidence in. People, they just have that undying kind of loyalty to him, right? Very similar to what Maximus did, and that's what made like kind of the ending a lot more memorable. Is like the fact that he was this Roman general going through all of this is very similar to what they were trying to do with Acacius. I just feel like it fell flat. So, but yeah, so I don't know. Like that's kind of my ramble about what I wish they did. How do you feel about that? Do you feel like Acacius, was he good to die there, or was there more that should have happened?
I mean, I think he should have played a much bigger role in helping rally the army to Lucius's cause. What I would also say is I think I would go so far as to add that Macrinus kind of played his hand too early. I think he should have played both Lucius and Acacius and kind of make them feel like he was on their side, and even go so far as to help them escape. I think that would have added a bit more intrigue to the character, and then you come to find out, oh, he's been playing them all along. He's in it for himself. I kind of feel like Acacius dies too early, and Macrinus kind of just plays his hand in a way where he kind of showed his hand at the wrong place at the wrong time. He showed it to Lucilla, where I thought it would be a bit more impactful. He kind of showed it to Lucius and Acacius outside of the walls of Rome, and that way you could have had a more impactful ending. And I think I even told you this either during the movie or after. They kind of wasted an opportunity by having these two armies there, and them not doing anything with it. Yeah, it's like you got these two armies. I mean, naturally you would expect them to go at it and have an all-out Roman battle, but no, it became a one-on-one kind of situation, like what you saw in the movie Troy. So I feel like
good comparison.
I feel like Acacius, should have lasted a little bit longer. The way he died was a bitch move. I agree, and I feel like, and I feel like Macrinus should have I guess quote unquote been more helpful to the two of them, and only to kind of and I would even go so far as to say I think it would have been impactful if at a critical moment when they're outside of Rome, Macrinus kills Acacius, and
Yes.
that's when he reveals, what he's really after.
Perfect.
Right.
Yeah, that's exactly the same thing I was thinking. Yep, we are on the same page with that. Like, there was a much better opportunity for that to happen. And I think this is why too, like for Macrinus, because he's, out here. So we see him, he's kind of, when Caracalla, right, and Geta are there in this like argument, you see like Macrinus, he like kind of like takes the sword or the dagger, and he like pretty much kills Gita right in front of him, right? Geta. And I'm gonna keep saying the different things all throughout the whole thing. So sorry for everyone that's really annoyed with that. But like we see him get killed, right? We see Geta get killed. And Caracalla kind of assumes kind of the sole emperor type of position. And this is where, he makes the first consul choice, which is the monkey, which, it's kind of, haha, like Caligula and the horse, right?
Yeah.
And then the second consul is Macronus, right? And then we see kind of like, we see more and more of the story where he pretty much sets up for Lucilla to be killed in the Colosseum, knowing full well that her death would kind of increase the riot. And I like how blunt Denzel Washington plays this character, because he's just like, politics. Like he absolutely chooses scenery in so much of the stuff that he does in this film, which I really appreciated. Because he pretty much takes this opportunity as there's all this chaos going on. He kills off Caracalla, and then that's where now he is kind of in this position of power, and he's taking the army out of Rome to kind of go up against this force, these other Roman soldiers that are pro for Lucius' side, into this kind of final altercation. And it's kind of like lackluster, right? Like, I think this is the problem when you have a villain like him. We don't really see him as a fighter, right? We see him as this really cunning politician. And to me, it's so weird when like all of a sudden, like he's really good with the bow and arrow and he could like fight with a sword. And I just didn't really believe that. I think that's a problem I had with the climax of this. It's like, it's hard for me to really envision Macronus's character to be much of a fighter. So it always felt like he was going to lose no matter what. So I don't know. How'd you feel about that final altercation where we got these two opposing sides and it just comes down to this mano-a-mano fight where, you have one guy that's a gladiator that's very proficient, and then you have kind of this guy that's more in the political atmosphere of things. And I don't know. I didn't really like that. But what'd you think about it?
I mean, you would think a guy who's been, dealing with gladiators for 30 something years, you think he would have had some experience in the ring himself before he kind of became a dealer himself.
That's fair.
So I mean, for me, I think, yeah, it's great that they show him as this sort of, astute, wily political figure who knows how to play the game. But I think what would have made it even more interesting is if he not only proved to be a match for, but even surpassed Lucius as a fighter, because maybe he spent some time in the ring himself before he got into the whole machinations of politics. But at the end of the day, it is what it is. I mean, it's one of those things where you kind of just have to take it on the chin, really.
Yeah, and like I said, it would have been cool. Like maybe he was a guy that got his freedom from being a gladiator, right? We see that wooden sword, that was in the first one, was in the second one, would have been interesting if like that was something that happened with him. Or like I said, something that would have been more interesting is like maybe in this battle, right, this fictitious battle where Acacius is still alive, where like Macrinus kind of like uses more of his cunning to like assassinate these guys. To me, that would have been more interesting than this kind of like mano-a-mano macho nonsense, because it just didn't really jive for me. So but yeah, so we have these two opposing armies, our hero Lucius, who, like I said, I feel like he changed his whole like dynamic on what he wanted to do very quickly, because through most of the film, he doesn't care about Rome. Like he just wants his vengeance. And then he's like, oh, I actually really like my mom, and I don't want to see anything happen to her. And yeah, Rome, I kind of want to, fix it and stuff. And I'm like, none of that really worked for me. But like I said, I mean, I guess it kind of has this happy ending where, he ultimately is able to carry on his father's legacy and kind of lead Rome to its hopeful redemption until Gladiator 3 comes out, where it's Lucius' son that's now a part of it, and he becomes a gladiator again. And Rome's has 3 emperors now, and all of them are shitty. So,
well, you mentioned something very interesting. When we watch, after the movie, because you mentioned how in the first movie, Maximus is able to gain the trust and respect of his fellow gladiators, and that's how he's able to, do what he does near the end of the movie. Whereas here, it's almost as if it's expected for Lucius to kind of gain that respect, where he really doesn't do much in terms of, earning that. It's just expected. And I even pointed out, well, I mean, you could count the time they were, ribbing on him by making all those monkey noises, but it's not the same as what Maximus accomplished.
Yeah, I 100% agree. And to me, that's where Acacius is needed at the end. That to me is what would have put that together, because then I can totally understand why they want to fight alongside Lucius. That to me is the biggest fallout with this is Acacius was needed, in my view, to really get the story to where it needed to be. But I guess the writing was just kind of, they just decided no, he's son of Maximus. We know Maximus, and we'll just kind of transfer everything to him as Lucius, and it just didn't work for me. So, but yeah, that's a great point. Thank you for bringing up something that I mentioned before. But yeah, that's especially where I felt like Acacius was needed, and why his death was, to me, premature to make the story work well.
Well, how did you feel about the callbacks? Because we saw a lot of callbacks from Maximus's armor to to some of the lines that were said in the first movie getting echoed in the second one, to even Hans Zimmerman's theme being played at the end of the movie. What were your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I mean, it's gonna happen in something like this. I kind of just roll with it. I mean, I guess they missed an opportunity to talk about the "Are we not entertained" type of thing. I know he kind of has his moment in the Colosseum. It's like, is this how you respect your heroes? But yeah, it was going to happen. And, we have all the lines. We have the very similar story beats to what the first one was. So there was a lot of rinse and repeating, and it did feel old and tired, right? I felt like they wanted to do more for the story. So you have kind of this, kind of additional thing with Macrinus, right? And then you got, 2 emperors instead of just the one. And it felt like he just was like, well, we'll just add more to it. But to me, it just took away from the story, right? And I feel like that was a big misstep on that. And this is why I feel like the first one will be remembered really well. The second one will always feel like just a something that will live in the shadow of the original.
Mm-hmm. So yeah, I mean, it's one of those things where you kind of wonder what exactly was going through their mind, because they ended it on such a glorious note in the first movie.
Yes,
there really was no need. And what it is? It kind of reminds me of a situation where if you have a friend who keeps telling you, hey, I'm going to get you this present, you're going to really like, and you're like, yeah, no, that's fine. I don't really care about it. And they get you the present, and you look at it, and it's a bit underwhelming, because they kept saying over and over again, hey, we're going to do Gladiator 2. You guys are going to really, really like it. And we're like, yeah, sure, whatever. And then we see it, and we're like, I'm not really impressed with the presentation here.
Yeah.
I mean, it's something they really didn't need to do, but they kept advertising and saying it over and over again, we're going to do it. And it's one of those movies that didn't need to be made,
Yes. I was actually talking with another friend, and they described the film as sufficient. And I'm like, you know what? That's probably a good way to put it. Like, it hits what you would expect it to hit, and it doesn't really take that many chances. And I feel like when you're wanting to make a sequel like this, you need to try to bring something else. Adding an extra emperor or adding some of those things that you did just didn't really distinguish it enough for me to go the extra distance there. So. But yeah, that's the way I look at it. Overall, I mean, it's an okay movie, right? If you like the first one and you're like, hey, I really want to kind of see it again, except with some different characters, then maybe you'll get some enjoyment out of it. I mean, the visuals are really good. I don't want to take away from that. Denzel Washington did fantastic in this role. I really liked his character. I love how much he just kind of eats. Like he does not feel like he belongs in the movie. Like he absolutely just feels like he's kind of playing his own role, and I just have to kind of admire him for that because it at least makes something memorable in this. I mean, the sets, the costumes, everything else is superb. It's just a tired story that didn't really do anything more. And I think, like I said, they missed a big opportunity with doing more with some of the other characters. So I think overall, I would give this. I don't really want to give it a 3 because I'm gonna give it a 3. It does just barely enough for me to be like, okay, it was fine, but it just didn't really excel anything. I wish it just thrived to want to do something more, and we didn't give it. So I'll give it 3 sandals out of 5. It's a totally fine film that does things right. It's just too much of a rehash of what the first one. So Luca, I'll pass it over to you. Give us your final thoughts.
I'll give it a 2.5 out of 5. I mean, there's nothing about the movie that really sticks out to you because everything that they did in this movie, they already did in the first movie. And my thing is, if you're going to do a sequel, at least try to do something original, right? I mean, we've seen a lot of movies this year that have tried to capitalize on the success of previous iterations, and they've fallen flat on their face. And I feel like, I feel like in this case, what Ridley Scott did was basically just give us a subpar product. And what's tragic is the fact is that we know he's capable of making really, really good movies.
Absolutely.
But I think it's just gotten to that point where he just needs to hang up his laurels and just, go off into the sunset because there really is nothing left for him to do. Now that being said, he has mentioned like he's going to keep directing for as long as he can, and he is thinking about doing a Gladiator III movie, which if he does, may the gods be with him. It's one of those things where where when you make a movie like this, you have to consider like what is the audience going to think. And I know he's infamous for blaming the kids for not getting his movies. My rebuttal to that is we get your movies and we get it enough to know when you've given us a shitty product. And this has nothing to do with a change in taste or anything. The truth of the matter is that you gave us a shitty product. And if you want to fault us for not liking it, well, that's your prerogative. But you can't keep doing this. You can't keep giving us these movies and saying these are brilliant. You have to like it because I made it. I mean, we've seen it with Napoleon. We've seen it with later Alien films. I mean, and now he's doing it with Gladiator II. Like, I'm starting to wonder, like, if he's intentionally doing this to troll everybody. Like, I almost want to know what is his overall goal. Is there a bit of Macrinus going on in his head where he's kind of playing the long game with us and just when he's on his deathbed, he kind of reveals, oh, I was just doing it to mess with everybody here. Because I really don't know what to make of this movie. I really don't. I mean, there are some moments where you want to like it, but most of the time you just sit there and you just say to yourself, what the hell did I just watch? But it is what it is. But yeah, go ahead and let us know down in the comments below what you think. Did you enjoy Gladiator 2, or did you wish you saw Wicked instead? And as always, thank you so much for tuning in, and we'll catch you on the next one. Take it easy.
Hey! Is this not why you were here?